Finally, I have obtained the power of the microphone.
Oh, hey, how can I avoid copyright issues here? That one wizard who was friends with another wizard before turning on him in a really famous book and movie trilogy involving a ring. Whew, that's way too long of a title. You know what, I'm just gonna call you the Dark Wizard.
Very well. You may refer to me as such, for I serve the Dark Lord
Nope. Can't say his name either.
I find your demeanor rather annoying.
Yeah? Well, I find your face rather annoying as well.
How dare you insult me? Now you shall feel the wrath of my power.
Alright, you know what? That's enough. You can go now.
You cannot banish me. I am so...
And I just did. Huh, I swear, with these evil wizard types, it's like you give them an inch and they take a whole podcast. Anyway, welcome to the Saved Us Draft podcast. Alright, and thank you for tuning in for another week. As you may have noticed, we're trying out some intro music here. I haven't decided which one I'm going to use, so it's going to change each week in the meantime until I figure out which one I like best. And you know what? Honestly, the goal is to commission somebody to write an original piece for the beginning of the show every week. So stay tuned for that, but in the meantime, we'll do some fun royalty-free stuff. And we're on episode 10, if you can believe it. Not only that, but we crossed 2,000 downloads and counting earlier this week. It's crazy. The series continues to grow here, and I'm just so thankful for all the listeners around the world. And I say that because, according to my Substack analytics, the Saved Us Draft podcast has listeners in 60 different countries. That's insane to me. But again, I'm incredibly grateful. Well, getting right into it. This week was better than the last one, but not by much. I don't have anything major to report on the personal front like I had last week, but trust me, you know what? No news is good news. That being said, one of my dogs, Clover, which I took to the vet for her annual checkup, a few days later she started getting tummy trouble, so she's still working through that. But rest assured, as a paranoid dog dad, I have already been to the vet again to get her some specialized food as well as some probiotics. And we're attacking this head on and trying to get her stomach back on the right side. She's been known to have a sensitive stomach before, so unfortunately it's one of those things where I'll talk about it later in my rant, but I wish I could just talk to her, and find out what she ate or what caused this. But anyway, all that aside, I did launch a new article in The Craft of Writing today, and this time I was talking about the difference between plotters, pantsers, and plantsers. But don't worry if you haven't read it, we're going to talk about it a bit more in today's episode, including a look at which of the three types I consider myself to be. Last but not least, we're launching the Spring Novel Writing Marathon, or SpreeNoWriMa, this weekend. Both Hazel and I are hosting some Discord events tomorrow, March 15th, to celebrate the launch of the challenge. Hazel's is going to be in the morning, and mine will be in the evening. They are on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, so we're trying to catch as many people as we can. Of course, time zones are a thing, so I wanted to reiterate here on the podcast that these events are completely optional and not required to participate in the challenge. That being said, if you can make it, you'll find the link to the post that describes both events and what they're about and what times they're being hosted, and I'll have that in the show notes. These events will also be hosted through Discord, since that seems to be the most common way to do a voice call. We're not doing video. So you'll find an invite to Hazel's Discord server, which is where we'll be hosting both events. There's a channel in there for the challenge, so that's where we'll be meeting up for each of these events tomorrow, and that's March 15th. Check the show notes for all the links that you need, or visit the SpreeNoWriMa publication on Substack to learn more. And as always, earlier this week I had a thread on Tuesday where I posted my subscriber chat and asked people to share links to their latest work. As is tradition, I have selected 5 of these stories from that thread at random to shout out on today's episode. So, without further ado, let's get into it. First up in the weekly shoutouts is The Tignon from L.G. Wells. This is actually a series that LG has been publishing on Substack, but as of this writing, the series is officially complete. You can find individual chapters on their publication, as well as one that has the entire story all at once, and there was even an audio version made of this chilling ghost tale. I'll include a link to the full version and the audio version that was read on the Red Treehouse podcast in the show notes. But let's talk about the story. First of all, this story was inspired by true events, which always sets a nice atmosphere for me from the get-go. It begins as a strange sighting on a country road in the middle of the night, but it quickly spirals into a full-on investigation into the supernatural that never lets up on the tension. I decided to listen to the official audio version on the Red Treehouse podcast, and honestly, I think this is the best way to experience it for sure. The narration is very high quality, and they also included some great sound effects to keep things immersive. One thing I'd recommend is you can pair the audio with the full story on your computer screen so you can read along while you're listening. LG's knack for creating atmospheric and intriguing stories is on full display here, so I highly recommend you check it out if you're a fan of ghost stories. Second this week is Blazing White by EMR. Now, this is one of the first authors I met here on Substack, and every time I read something from them, I'm reminded that I need to read their stuff more often. Blazing White tells the story of outlaws trying to escape the law by fleeing into a winter storm. If you've ever played the video game Red Dead Redemption 2, this story reminded me a lot of the opening, but in this story, it takes a much different turn. I won't spoil the big reveal, but let's just say there's something besides law enforcement hunting them in the woods. I really hope this is where it was going, and I was not disappointed in the slightest. One thing I always notice with EMR's stories is that they're incredibly good at developing a believable and rich atmosphere. They have great details that are super vibrant, but they never slow down the action when they're talking about descriptions and imagery. It's just a really balanced horror story every time I've read something from them, and Blazing White is no different. I also have to give a special shout out to the descriptions toward the end regarding a certain set of eyes. And I'm dancing around spoilers here because I don't want to talk about it and spoil anything. But do me a favor, check this one out. You'll find a link in the show notes. I really love this one. Third this week is The Madman's Repentance by Hazel Allen. This story is the third of a series that began during Flash Fiction February. I forget exactly how the conversation started, but I basically ended up challenging Hazel to a bet that if they could get a certain number of restacks and likes on a post, they'd have to write a horror story based on one of my prompts. And they don't do horror stories normally, so that's what made it fun. And that's how this series was born. Hazel's style isn't usually, like I said, in the realm of horror and tragedy like this, but they stepped into this genre without any difficulty at all, which honestly is really impressive. Each of these stories follows a hitman and his target, both of whom are secretly in love. And of course, the one who hired the hitman is the target's father, and he's a mob boss. So you can imagine where this is going. It's not a series for the faint of heart, but it leverages its characters masterfully to tell a very rich, haunting, and at times extremely emotional story. I really love this conclusion as well, because it gave the series a real satisfying ending. Fourth this week is The Disappearance of Dr. Timothy Grand, Brotherhood by M.N. Avera. This particular story is part 2 of the series, so I'll include a link to part 1 in the show notes so you can get caught up. I'll tell you one thing though, I immediately knew I was going to like this piece because it does something that I did a few times myself during Flash Fiction February, which is to present the story as a meta-narrative, and in this case it's coming from the main character's journal. So part 1 of the series sets up how the journal was obtained, and then from there you read journal entries as you try to piece together the story. I'm such a fan of this approach because it makes the story feel incredibly immersive right off the bat. Explaining how the journal was found in part 1 also allows for some spectacular world building, and it also adds nice mystery and intrigue. The story discusses a mysterious group called the Brotherhood of Sacred Famine. As someone who loves mysterious and often evil secret societies and cults, this story had its hooks in me from the very beginning. Part 3 is coming soon, so do yourself a favor and get caught up on the series. You'll find a link to part 1 of The Disappearance of Dr. Timothy Grand in the show notes. Last but not least this week is Rings of Fire by Rachel Tribble. I'll tell you one thing, this story had me hooked from the very first line, which reads, and I quote, "The orb existed in the ether that filled the nihility between space and time." Yeah, that kind of philosophical imagery is always going to get my attention. This story, which is in the first of a series on Rachel's Substack entitled Of Turtles and Talking Stones, combines fantasy with nature to reveal an absolutely fascinating and beautiful world. The world building in this piece is next level, and the concept of the Sunweavers in it has me dying to learn more. The dialogue is another standout. I love how it delivered more information on the world without ever feeling forced. In particular, there's a line that reads, and I quote, "Fire can't be forced. It will always resist you. It has to trust you," which I just thought was a really cool line just on its own. And that's our 5 shoutouts for this week, but I'm going to throw in a bonus. Our bonus shoutout this week goes to Valentina here on Substack. She hosts co-writing streams on Twitch, and I was actually able to attend one live yesterday. Her schedule for streaming also includes some indie horror gaming streams and other types of content, but I can absolutely vouch for the co-writing streams that she does. It was super fun. Everyone gave me a warm welcome when I arrived, and the entire time she was playing music from games like Silent Hill and The Last of Us, so the atmosphere was absolutely pitch perfect. You can find Valentina here on Substack, where she posts notes every time she goes live, or you can find her streams directly on Twitch under the screen name Squigglybug. I'll leave a link to her Substack and her Twitch channel in the show notes, but if you're like me and you enjoy working alongside other writers, I highly recommend attending one of these co-writing streams. The energy is amazing. Okay, and that's it for real for this week's shoutouts. But stay tuned for new threads in my subscriber chat every Tuesday where you can drop links to your latest stories. I select 5 at random each week, so there's plenty of opportunities to have your story featured on the show if you're so inclined. Alright, next up is our top 3 stories from Substack this week, referring to my stories that I published. And this week, let's see what we had. Number 1 was Stalemate, which was technically part 2 that got the win. It was a 3-part series, but I'm just going to talk about the series as a whole here. What's interesting is that this story actually began as an exercise in world building for me. I used something called a story engine deck to build out the world and characters. They're basically like more advanced prompt cards. They're really cool, and I actually want to use them again soon. I've just been so busy that I haven't gotten around to it. But I highly recommend them. They're called story engine decks, if you want to look them up. So what I got after using the cards was a story set on an island with a bunker. Mysterious clouds were involved, and for characters I had a combination of a soldier and a researcher, if I recall correctly. From there, my story about 2 characters on opposite sides of a war-torn world was born. If you haven't checked out Stalemate yet, please do. I did audio narration for all 3 parts, including music and sound effects, so I think it turned out great. Second place this week was my story that I published called Once More, which really resonated with a few people. This piece was originally submitted to Vocal's Just a Minute Challenge in 2024, in which the challenge was to write a story that had to focus on a moment that lasts 60 seconds. So in this particular story, Once More, I wrote about a man on his deathbed who, upon meeting the incarnation of death, is told he can choose 60 seconds of his life to relive before it's time to go. It's a heavy piece, but my hope is that it would help people realize that death is just a transition to something else, and not necessarily the end. That's what I believe, at least, but you can check out that story and see what you think. And coming in third is my poem, One More Day. This was my first attempt at a stream of consciousness poem, and I feel like it turned out pretty well. I didn't use my usual style of rhyming for this poem, so it felt weird to let that structure go, since I usually feel like it adds to the overall flow of the piece. But ultimately, I was happy with how it turned out, and the feedback's been really great so far. So those are the top 3 stories this week. And thank you as always for all the support and all the comments and feedback. You know I always appreciate it. Next up is our section with our weekly writing tips. This week, I'm using this section to talk about the latest article that I published, which was, as I mentioned at the beginning, about 3 different types of writers: plotters, pantsers, and plantsers. These terms have been around for a while, but just in case you're not aware of what they mean, I'll do a quick rundown. Plotters are writers who plan out everything before they start writing. They'll do an outline, usually one that goes chapter by chapter or even scene by scene, and sometimes they'll even do a separate list of character bios and a world guide before they write a single word of their draft. But, like anything, there's different levels of plotters. The point is they plan ahead. Pantsers are the kind of writers who fly by the seat of their pants. They open a doc and then it's off to the races. The nice part about this approach is that you get right into the writing, but one potential downside is that you may run out of steam or write yourself into a corner since you didn't plan ahead. Doesn't always happen, but it can. Ask me how I know. Finally, plantsers are the types of people who combine a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. These people like to do some level of planning before they start writing, but not a ton. Instead, they map out the major plot points of a story or book and then use those as a general guide, allowing for bursts of creativity or pantsing in between. Now you can probably guess I consider myself a plantser, especially in recent years. My stories over time have become more complex and bigger and more than just word count, and as I've found my voice, I've realized that I need to be a little bit more organized in how I approach them. This is doubly true for stories that have multiple POVs or even branching narratives. I've done a few stories with multiple paths and endings here on Substack, and let me tell you, trying to do those without some kind of plan is a technical nightmare. Everything gets tangled. My current work in progress is a cosmic horror novel that has 6 POVs, so that's a perfect example of something that needs an outline. Otherwise, it's going to turn into Swiss cheese with all the plot holes it'll have. Now, here's the thing. I personally think that creativity needs some level of space to be chaotic and sort of run free, if you will, or you're going to miss out on some of the writing magic. So what I usually do is I get the general idea organized, and then I leave room for that pantsing. That way I have boundaries so I don't go off the rails, but I also leave room for that creative magic and sudden inspiration that we all know and love. It's a balance that works for me, but everybody's different. Check out the article I published today to learn more about plotters, pantsers, and planters. And be sure to let me know what category you fall into in the comments. All right, and next up is our brand new segment, Thoughts from the Void with Voidy.
I can attest, Sir Voidy's the best. He wouldn't dare play it close to the vest. He's here to share, from here into there, the writers and words of which he does care.
Hey, Voidy, welcome back to the show.
I still think this should be my show.
Well, if you're going to be like that, I can just remove the segment entirely.
What's that? I'm hard of hearing. You'll have to shout it into me.
All right. You know what? I'm just going to open the script and...
Wait, okay, I'll be good. What do you want me to talk about?
Whatever's on your mind.
Well, if I'm being honest, I'm a little sad.
Why's that?
I saw a few people saying they're leaving Substack this week.
Oh, I see. Well, I'm sure they have their reasons.
Yeah, but I feel like it's my fault. I should have answered them like you said in the last episode.
Hey, come on now. You can't save everyone. Every writer's journey is different. For some people, Substack just isn't the right fit. It could be because they want to focus on their writing instead of being distracted by the social media elements of the platform.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Come here. Let me give you a hug.
Okay.
Oh, crap. I forgot you're a void.
Ah, take my hand.
You don't have hands! Ah!
Don't worry, I'm pretty sure I'm not bottomless. You'll find your way out.
I can attest, Sir Voidy's the best. He wouldn't dare play it close to the vest. He's here to share, from here into there, the writers and words of which he does care.
Oh, okay. Now that I've crawled my way out of the depths of the void, welcome to our next segment, Bradley's Substack Soapbox Rant. So, this week, I posted about one of my dogs named Clover, and she's perfect and amazing, but a few days after she got a perfectly clean bill of health from her vet, she started getting sick. Now, I've already had the vet give me some meds for her, as I mentioned, but it's just frustrating when this happens because I can't ask her what's going on. Instead, I've got to guess about what it could be. I get to go down this whole rabbit hole of very unhelpful and panic-inducing Google searches while she continues to feel crappy. I've been a dog dad for many years now, so today's rant isn't about my sweet and perfect girls. Instead, it's about how I wish I could speak their language. How easy would it be just to ask our pets what's wrong and have them answer in a language we understand? Now, I realize that even if we could understand their language, they'd probably say something vague like my tummy hurts, but at least then we'd have something to work with. The other benefit of being able to go full-on Dr. Dolittle is that I'd be able to reassure them. I could say, hey, I know you don't feel good, but it's going to be okay, and I'm going to help you. Or at the very least, I could just tell them it's going to be okay. It's funny because even though I can't speak their language, my two dogs and I still understand each other pretty well. It's the little things, like their body language, the way they look at me, the context of the situation, stuff like that. An easy example is when I hear them trying to get water and the bowl's empty. I immediately get up and get them more water. It's easy to put together. But other things are more subtle. Clover, for example, will just sit and stare at me sometimes, or she'll sit and stare at a table where food and treats would normally be. And so in those situations, I can also connect the dots pretty well. But I've even had moments where I give her a treat and she'll stop eating it and stare at me. And I remember one time that happened, and I got up, I walked over, I broke the treat in half, and I gave it back to her, and she immediately went back to eating it. She just didn't want to deal with breaking it herself. So it's one of those things where we have this sort of unspoken language to fill the gaps, but God, I just wish that I could talk to them, it'd make things so much easier. That being said, I have a cat as well named Saga, who's super sweet, but really sassy. And I'm thinking that giving her the ability to talk, or for me to talk to her, wouldn't be the smartest idea. Because let me tell you, that cat probably has some strong opinions that I don't want to hear. Well, until they finally invent some way to communicate with our animals, maybe I'll get one of those button setups where you can have the dogs or the cat hit the button to ask for food or water to go outside. Who knows? In the meantime, I'll just keep doing my best while I worry about them, because that's what I do. Alright, and that brings us to our final segment, which is next week on Substack. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, we're launching the Spring Novel Writing Marathon, or Spree-No-Rima, starting tomorrow. To learn more about the challenge and our launch day events on tomorrow, March 15th, check the show notes for a link to the publication where you can learn more. Keep in mind, there are 3 tiers to register for, all of which include a cash prize for one lucky winner that hits their goal. Once you subscribe to the official publication, you can register with the form that you'll find in many of the posts and choose which tier you want to join. The options are based on word count goals for the month, so we have 10K, 25K, and 50K. Next week, I'm hopping back into my Devine stories as well, fingers crossed. I had some other projects come up outside of Substack that required my full attention, but I know there's at least a couple of you out there waiting for more Devine stories, including the series, so stay tuned, it's on the way. I have a few stories in the works meant to introduce you to some members of the Order in the series before it officially kicks off. The way I describe it is that it's kind of like the Avengers sort of approach, where each of these stories kind of ends with them meeting Fenton Marybrook and being invited to the Order. And so this gives you a way to get to know all of them before I throw you into their adventures. And here's another thing. Nobody's actually said this at all, so this could be in my head, but I feel like I've been slacking on my reading. And by that I mean like reading other stories and poems on Substack. And one thing that I like to do always is that if I read something, I like to give it a like, I like to leave a comment, I like to restack it, I like to share my thoughts. And I've been trying to do that as much as possible, but with everything going on in the last couple weeks, I feel like I've been slacking a little bit. And just wanted to let everybody know that obviously it's not intentional. As you probably have heard me complain about on here, I've got a lot going on in my personal life, but another goal this coming week is to get back into reading and sharing more of your incredible work, because the fact of the matter is that I love doing it, and I know that it helps support my fellow writers, which is what I'm here to do. I'm here to publish my work, and I'm here to support my fellow writers. So I got to do both. They both mean the same level of priority to me. So I'm going to make that more of a focus this coming week. Just thought I'd mention that as well. And that brings us to the end of episode 10. Can you believe it's been 10 episodes already? Whew! In times like this, I do feel like time flies, like they say, but this week seemed to last forever, so I don't know. Maybe it's all relative, like Einstein said. In any case, I appreciate all of you. And I wish every one of you listening a wonderful, safe, and productive week of writing. And this is Bradley Ramsey, signing off. This is a secret message for people that listen to the end of the episode. People that listen to the end of the episode are cool. If you're hearing this, then you're pretty cool.